Hello and welcome to Recruiting is No Joke. I am your host, Joe Lalgee, the realist recruiter. I got a sign so you know it's ultra official, but I'm super excited to be here with an amazing guest. You know I always get the best guests, but we're going to have a conversation about what's going on in the recruitment landscape, what's going on in the job market, and what they're anticipating for the future. Cailean, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here. Why don't you give everyone a quick, I think we call it the Twitter bio, even though it's X, but why don't you give us a quick update, who you are and what you do and who you do it for? Awesome. I got to maybe get a little bit more of a ring to that, but there we go.
That's cool. I'm super stoked to be here. Pretty surreal.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Recruiting is No Joke. This episode was brought to you by Interactive EQ, a one-of-a-kind talent assessment platform that measures how people would handle real-life situations. The assessments can be best described as an interactive, movie-like experience where the talent plays a first-person character in the story. You can check out what they do here at www.interactiveeq.com and tell them that Joel sent you. We all know that hiring is so much more than just a resume, and now you can find out how candidates will actually react in real-life situations. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it, and you're definitely going to want to check it out. Now, back to this week's episode. Thanks so much again. We couldn't do it without you.
But I'm Cailean Bailey, and I lead global talent acquisition for Design Pickle. We started as a creative services company. Now we've built this entire tech platform to enable creative services globally. And so we're about 550 people across the globe, 15 different countries total.
Wow. So how long have you been with Design Pickle for?
Oh, just a shade under 5 years.
All right, which is that's like 50 years in recruitment. So 5 years. When you got to Design Pickle, how big were they? And then how much growth have you seen over that time period?
Yeah, we've seen some exponential growth. COVID was actually a pretty big accelerant for us because we're a fractional design service.
Yeah,
and we're designed to augment an in-house design team, or if you're a small business, we can kind of take it over and deliver it. And so fractional service, because there was a lot of condensing in budgets and things like that, accelerated. Plus, we were launching new services and stuff like that. So we've grown by about between 100 and 120 people every year over the last 5 years. And certainly there's attrition and things like that happen. We've not been immune to reductions in our workforce. I'm very transparent about that because that's real and it's part of my life and our life in this industry. But it's been like drinking out of a fire hydrant from where what I came into to where we're at today, and being part of actually building an infrastructure was a really unique opportunity that I don't think many people get in their career. And I was really excited for that. To be honest, I was a referral. I used to work with our head of people in a different role. And she's like, hey, I got this pickle theme company, kind of creative tech. And I'm like, I don't know really what this is, but it seems cool. I trust you. So let's do it.
I love it. You started in recruitment with an agency. How did you get into that agency recruitment role? I get questions all the time. How do people get into recruitment? So how did you get into that agency role?
I think we got to go back a little bit farther to really understand, because I say that I fell upwards into recruiting. I'm very grateful for it. But when I graduated college in 2008, it was crummy economic times. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it was a great recession, right?
I was a soccer player coming out of college, and I did a marketing internship, and I was so terrible. I was so terrible that the company paying me they contacted my university and they wanted money back. That's how bad I was.
Oh, wow.
And I'm leaning into that now as like a period of growth for me. But I was a soccer player, and all I wanted to do was play soccer. I wanted to coach soccer, play soccer. Everything I did was soccer, and it was very narrow-minded. But when I was doing that internship, I realized that all I could think about was the men's league game I had that night or whatever. So that launched into graduate school, which became a 7.5-year, 7-season career in Division I men's college athletics. It took me all over the country, all over the world. When I decided to leave that, because it's a really tough gig. You're chasing the next job across the globe, or across the country, and what's next? I was in California. Do I finally get the job back at Northwestern, what I really wanted, or?
And this is coaching, right?
Yeah. This is all coaching. Yeah, I was far from good enough to be a pro player. When I moved to Arizona, the end of 2014, I'd finished out my coaching career. I was applying to every job ever, from customer service rep to sales. People told me I was probably a behavioral profile of a sales rep. So I was trying to go in sales. And an agency, I actually applied to an agency job, rather a job that an agency had posted. Talked to the agency owner on the phone. I didn't even know what an agency was. At the time, I remember thinking like, wait, companies don't just hire people directly? Like, so in some ways that was an advantage because I went into the office to meet her. We found out that we both gone to, where I had gone to graduate school was where she had gone to undergrad. And we had this, Valparaiso Crusaders connection there. And she's like, you have everything that it takes to be a really good recruiter. Your experience in recruiting college athletes at the places that I was at is very relevant to what we do in corporate team building. It's right person, right seats, right? Like, you're a soccer guy, so you know how hard it is to find a really good left-sided left defender. Yeah. They're unicorns. And so you just change the team concept, you adjust what you're looking for, and it's the same thing. The same is true for building an orchestra, a choir, anything, really. So I walked into that office thinking like, I don't know what this is going to be. And she's like, I want to hire you. And I was like, you're kidding. Because I was getting feedback of like, well, you're just this soccer guy. You're this athletics guy. Like you have zero corporate. And so I'm pushing close to my 30s at the time. And all my other friends had gone straight into corporate world of finance, sales, whatever. Even people that had gone into agency and gone the traditional route of going into a big agency, cutting their teeth, and then navigating their recruiting path from there. So this woman, I am eternally grateful for, took a massive flyer on something that was completely raw. And knowing what I know now, being in leadership, like sometimes that's better because you don't have to untrain habits. You just found somebody who wanted to call everyone, knock on every door. I wasn't scared to get out and network. I just needed to know, I just need to be trained on what does a product manager do? What does an engineer do? I didn't even know what SaaS was. Did some construction recruiting too. And I quickly learned that one of the best things that I could do was not pretend to be an expert in everything.
I love that.
If I went into a conversation with a software engineer and pretended like I was a software engineer, I'm going to lose a lot of respect. And so the best advice I got was you don't have to know everything. You have to know the right questions to ask. And that still rings true almost 10 years later now. But I got to touch everything. I mean, Phoenix at the time was one of the fastest growing markets. And I think it probably still is. We had tech companies from the Bay Area that were putting outposts here because cost of living was more reasonable. We had huge growth in real estate tech and like the iBuyers, Open Door, OfferPad, Zillow was really growing at the time. So my agency was small, woman-owned. We had some really good contacts with the cities, and we were getting exposed to everything. And I just took it as a opportunity to learn as much as I possibly could.
When you were working agency, did you have that inkling or like that thought about, oh man, I want to at some point go internal? Like how did that journey progress from agency into internal? I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question because at some point I did get the sense that I wanted to wear a singular jersey of a team or a company.
So you weren't just like a burned out agency recruiter.
Agency recruiting was very similar to my athletic playing career and my athletic coaching career because you learn to ride the waves. And I actually love the emotion of it. And one of the best pieces of coaching advice I ever got in early career, which is still true to this day in any sort of recruiting in-house agency, is if you are going to take the losses as hard as you do, then you need to start taking credit for the wins. And I've found that to be so critical to me and me as a leader now with my own team. But what agency life was for me was the pace. It was still the competitiveness. It was the intensity whilst never sacrificing your quality, your experience for your candidates and your clients at the time. So I got this beautiful exposure to every type of person, every type of company. Ultimately, that helped me narrow down the environment that I wanted. And I think somebody at some point said, hey, you'd be great in a startup because you just kick doors and you're just like, you're fast paced and intense, but I still will never sacrifice the quality. There's three things my recruiting MO is I'll never sacrifice the candidate experience, the standard, or the process. We're not going to circumvent any of that. We're not going to reduce any of that because they're there for a reason. And I think that can make me difficult to work with sometimes because I'm not going to skip a step. But I learned all those things just through exposure to such a strata of, at the time, local companies here in Phoenix.
A lot of people want to get into startup life. They want to get into the tech world. It's getting harder and harder nowadays to be able to do that. I would say out of most of the job seekers I talk to, the most common questions are around like breaking into tech or breaking into startup. And I think everybody kind of has that dream and aspiration, right? Start off at a really small company and ride like the wave until they're the next Amazon or the next Nvidia or whatever, and make a bunch of money. But what would be some like realities that you think maybe aren't talked about a lot when it comes to what life is actually like at a startup, and what are maybe some of those things that people wouldn't necessarily think about or aren't like advertised in a day in a life social media video on TikTok.
I think you make a good point of like people hear about early hires at these certain companies where their equity gets paid out in the tens of millions when the company sells. I don't know the actual data point on it, but the reality is most startups don't actually make it.
Yeah, I think it's like probably less than 1% probably make
Right.
it. It's got to be something like that.
And the other thing that I've learned in my recruiting career is like what actually equity is. Do you get equity or do you get the chance to buy equity? Because they're very different. And then there's public and there's private and like those funding rounds and things like that. So in my experience, I think the reason I've been successful is because of the behavioral side. And now that I've built the competency-based hiring model and the performance management competency model at my company, I realize how much we index on behavioral competencies. And what I mean by that is curiosity, huge predictor of success. Adaptability.
How do you measure those things? Because I saw the post the other day that was like, don't hire on experience, hire on drive.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I agree. But I'm like, how do you measure that in like an interview, or how do you actually score drive or curiosity?
This is something that I'm speaking about next week, and I call them disguised competencies. So we have a really creative hiring process. It aligns with our creative company, and we don't want to have a super dry, boring, templated or ultra templated, don't ever go off script kind of model, because that's not working in a startup. Your interview needs to mimic and assess what life is going to be like when you're in it. And so we assess typically on 5 to 7 behavioral and 5 to 7 functional competencies, as well as core value alignment. So I call them disguised competencies. You can say, how curious are you when you're in a new job? Like, oh, okay, well, I understand it.
I'm very curious.
I am a very curious person, Joel, and I like to read books. We rephrase it, and this is one of the coolest questions we get when we're doing candidate NPS scores. We get feedback on this. We ask, what's something recent that you've learned that you've applied to your life or profession? We don't care what the answer is, except for, I haven't learned anything recently. I would say that's the only wrong-ish answer.
I stopped learning once I graduated and got my degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
20 years ago.
A developer that's been in software engineering for 10 years and they say they haven't learned anything. It's like, dude, we're going through a massive shift in shifting from our microservices to, or shifting to microservices. And like, you got to be agile and be able to adapt. You may be perfect for 6 months.
So I get this straight though, because I don't want to skip over it. The question is, what have you learned recently?
Yeah. What's something you recently learned and applied to your profession? The other things that we ask questions about disagreement. And we try to get creative with how we ask them and not go for this, how many golf balls can you fit into an airplane? I understand the thought exercise behind that of like, if you want to think about, and you start, like really what questions do you ask as follow-up to that versus like an actual numerical value that you give. But I think asking questions that are to tease out experience where you had to learn something or you didn't know the answer to something. And so today, it's actually never been easier to find resources that can support you in your job and in anything. So we're actually looking for the track of their thoughts and where it goes. And then we ask for a lot of written feedback too. I'm the guy you don't want coming after you for those scorecards. It's been 6 hours. Your memory recall is going to really suck.
You're talking about feedback from the hiring managers.
Yeah. And then when we re-engage a candidate, they're like, oh, that was a really interesting way that they asked that question. So that's part of being here. We are hiring you because you are going to fill a knowledge or skill gap that we need. That's the genesis of most, if not all, hiring, at least in my experience. And so we want you to tell us what you've done and what you can do, but also how you get from A to B, even if it's limited information or fragmented information that you're getting. And I can give you an example of my life and when I knew exactly what I was getting into at a high growth startup, because I think this is indicative of what a lot of people go through in any role at a startup. It's my first week post onboarding. We actually did have a small office that had a mezzanine, and the CEOs kind of leaned over the mezzanine and was like, hey, we need to hire a VP of product, Cailean. And I'm like looking up and I'm like, oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Like thinking he's going to send me a job description, all these things. And I was like, do you have is that like, he's like, that's it. Like, and we need to hire a VP of product. And I sat there and I'm like, this is exactly why I'm here. Because I've been hired for my expertise, even though it's sometimes weird to give ourselves credit for that. You sort of just realize that it was a hell of a way to prove yourself. Like week 1 into a job of hiring a critical role in a company that was pivoting from service-led to product-led at the time. I was like, okay, here we go. So I had to get really curious. Actually what do we need to do to build this out? Who do I need to involve? Like, I basically started interviewing everybody in the company to find out like what is the need. Because I know with a visionary CEO who's a incredible person who is also very high octane, who now, knowing what I know now, needs operators around him. That was what I was going to get, that requisition. There was no intake. Well, it was like a fragmented, minimal intake. So it's like, okay, well, I'm here and I need to be okay with the fact that I've been hired as a domain expert here. And this is a chance to really show up and prove it. Situations like that are something that people who pivot into high growth startup companies are really going to need to be okay with. Personally, I love it. I love taking something that's a bit chaotic and bringing organization to it and being like a real steward of treating now my clients, our internal clients, hiring managers, I treat them like customers. And the candidates are our customers. Our employees are our customers.
Talk to me a little bit about this, because I don't think I've ever had anybody on the show. I've had a lot of people say, hey, candidate experience is important, but you're the first person to drop the NPS on me. So like, walk me through that. And then I'd be curious what you think of just right now, the state of candidate experience and why it is at the state that it's in, and maybe just some like thoughts in getting an NPS score, what you've noticed, not only where we're at, but potentially how we could improve it, and like what you're hearing from people. I take it you get a lot of applicants. Are you fully remote? Are you remote?
Remote first, as we say.
Okay, so you get a lot of applicants with the jobs that you're. What's the average applicant amount that you get to a job?
Well, I just looked it up, but last year it was around 40,000 total. So yeah, I mean, that's a couple thousand job. Now you have to factor in the person. You know, the one-click apply is a nice feature in principle, but it does bring applicants that quite a distance away from the actual role, objectively.
Yeah, just so people know, that would be like, hey, it's a fully remote position, but we're hiring in the US, and then somebody comes and applies from the Philippines. That would be an example of like,
yeah. The reality is today, to be unique in a hiring process, in a candidate experience, has never been easier.
All right, say that one again. You gotta say that one.
It has never been easier to be unique in your hiring and recruiting process, candidate experience, whatever you want to call it. And it's because if you are transparent about salary up front, if you set the agenda of what the interview loop is and who it is, and even I go as far as like saying, hey, when you interview with Kelsey, her focus areas are going to be this. I'm not giving away the farm, and I'm not telling any candidate anything I wouldn't say to anybody else.
Yeah.
But I do want the candidates to feel comfortable going into that. So,
I just did a post on that, by the way, about like prepping. I was like, I think prepping candidates can sometimes seem, or I've heard people say, oh, well, that's like cheating. I want the candidate to show up. But then the more I think about it, I'm like, there's so much anxiety around interviews. And for a lot of people, they have a lot writing out. And it's like, you're not actually getting a true person if they're not comfortable. So like you said, like if there's just, hey, this is the type of person you're interviewing with, here's maybe what you should wear, or like present yourself. Like it's not really cheating. It's just like,
I mean, you gotta do it for everybody, I think, that's at that stage. Otherwise 100%. then it's tricky, slippery slope. But then you give feedback. And then you give an offer. So when you give feedback to a candidate, you have to give what I call truth and hope. And it doesn't have to be over the course of an hour. I have a 10-minute Calendly link. And this is feedback for candidates that have cleared a certain stage. Obviously, I can't give feedback to 1,500 candidates, many of which are dispositioned because of location or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So transparency in your salary, transparency in your process, transparency in your feedback, but also when we make an offer, I tell people exactly what the feedback is and why we want to hire them. Think about that as like a candidate. You're like, oh my gosh, like this is what that person said about me. And also this is the opportunity that I have and the problem that I'm seeing to solve. The reality is like that is so easy to do now. It's so easy.
Let me ask you this. How many people are booking in to have that 10-minute feedback conversation? So let's say you get to the final round, you're not one of the people that picked. Like how many of those people are opting in for that feedback phone call?
So I give an option. I can send a voice note, I can send or a Loom, or I can send a Calendly link where they can have a verbal conversation with me.
And do you have an idea of like, number one, how many people want any feedback? Is it 100% people want feedback every time?
I offer it to everybody at that stage. I would say probably 75% actually take me up on it. I was nervous as hell to have those conversations. I thought people were going to tee off on me and say, you guys are dumb. You didn't get it right. You don't know me. You didn't ask me questions. What actually happens is they're like, I never get this. Thank you. And I'm like, hey man, like if you're our second place candidate, I've got friends here in Phoenix that are hiring for a similar role. Can I bump your resume over to them?
What's that one platform? It's like Paraform. You're like, hey, get in the Paraform. I'll get a bonus on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just do it. I actually do it for my own candidate.
Send them my way. I'll get the bonus in.
So one of the best talent acquisition metrics that nobody talks about is like, are rejected candidates referring people to you still? I started to see that after we were giving candidates.
Dude, come on.
It's actually been really cool. And then also some of those people that didn't work at that time might work in the future as we continue to scale. So at the end of the day, though, it's very simple things that we can do that I will say, unfortunately, will make you unique, because it should be the complete opposite. Companies that go should be outliers.
And just so like, I think this is a differentiation of what we're talking about, because I think some people do think that ghosting is like when you apply and you don't hear anything back. Like, is that ghosting to you, or is ghosting like, hey, you've been through part of the process, past the application, so we've had some engagement, and then you never hear back? What do you consider ghosting?
Yeah, I consider it to be there's some form of engagement in terms of an offer to interview, screen, hiring manager stage. Like the really bad ghosting scenarios you hear about is somebody that's put in 5 rounds of interviews and assessment or whatever, coding tests or whatever, and then they never hear anything. And unless that person that's running that process has left the company or the earth, that's like completely unacceptable. Exactly. And frustrating too, because there are other people in the community, which there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of recruiters across the globe that have to reap that. Like we have to account for really poor behavior from other people. And so this whole idea of like really adding what I call surprise and delight moments in your process is very simple. It will make you an outlier. So we've started actually tracking, like as we're starting implementing these little things throughout our hiring process, we're actually tracking it to a business metric now, like employee retention, customer retention, obviously revenue and margins and things like that.
This is, in my mind, this has always been the roadblock to candidate experience, is if you go to a CFO and you say, hey, we need to invest in, I don't know, more, like a better CRM so we can keep track of where people are at in the process, and we need more automation so we can get back to people, or whatever it is. In my mind, the question then is like, what ROI are we going to get? It's like, these people aren't going to be happy. They're going to get rejected. Like, walk me through how you're tying it into real business ROI, because I haven't heard really anyone do it that well. So,
right. I'll first start by saying, like, we as recruiting professionals can't change GAAP accounting principles and how things are coded in the balance sheet, right? Like, so recruiting teams are looked at as a cost center. I always say, if we end up being able to source, screen, put somebody through this really thorough, engaging, creative process, and it's a sales rep that hits 200% of quota, I always am like, well, look at who found them, right? And so in that regard, like, it would be easy to say we are revenue generating. That's hard to do. That's hard to like go to a CFO and say. I think what we're trying to do is, when you're making a business case for that, you're talking about, I need to have the opportunity to source and actually put my reticle on a specific profile that is going to move the needle from a business perspective. It's not up to me to say, hey, your job, hiring manager, is going to move business by X. That's up to the business unit leader. Like, they know that. My goal is to get as close or better than what they want to make their job easier, so that it drives whatever business metric they we have an OKR model, and so we have the umbrella OKRs for the quarter and the year from the executive team. Every single goal that every team has, people operations, marketing, sales, finance, engineering, rolls up into an overarching business metric. For me, my role has actually evolved into talent as a whole and talent journey. So it's a little bit easier for me to make that business case, because historically I've been on the acquisition side. I think what we're going to see in talent acquisition is, especially in-house internal, those roles becoming more into onboarding experience and performance management, and quality of hire is the real big one this year. And I'm really excited about that. Mapping quality of hire. Then we're going to start to actually have data from months and years to show that because we did this really good process and we sourced the right person, and we did all these things right, we see the impact that this individual has made in the company. Of course, I'm speaking very broadly because this could be any type of role, not just a sales role. We can replicate that. And then we're justifying the spend on a sourcing tool, a vendor, a CRM, a job board, things like that. So we're tying it back. As TA becomes more talent operations and talent management and just talent in general focused, even if it's not like functionally your role, I feel like TA people should have visibility into that, because if we're hiring people and they're not staying and they're not performing, like, we have to adjust what's on the front end, which is typically us. I think we're going to see more and more people that are blending those roles, or at least becoming more privy to the data on how people are performing once they're in seat. And then it becomes pattern recognition. And when you can recognize a pattern, you can recognize the data typically, and then your business case becomes easier. So that in October, November, when I go back to the CFO and I'm asking for some new toys, I can say, hey, this worked really well for us. What if we added this, layered that on top of it?
Are you using any tools when it comes to candidate experience that you're like, this has been really, really helpful? Or is it just kind of more of a process with kind of more standardized tools? Or is there even any tools that you're using? It's just more focusing on it.
I work for a design company, and so I have really cool design assets. I have access to video assets. So I think like a marketer, and I want a lot of recruiting professionals to think like marketers. Like, what would marketing do? Yeah. What would marketing do? And so the best thing that I can do is use Design Pickle Creative Service for my own candidate experience. The short answer to that is no. I actually run a pretty lean budget. Job boards, the candidate experience does not cost a ton. It's down to the individuals that are driving that experience. Surprise and delight moments isn't always big fancy tools. It's, here's the feedback. Here's the opportunity. Are you in?
I love it.
Let's stay in.
I love it.
Like, if you're in it, let's be in it. I think one thing too, I don't want to go too far off script, but people look at our company from an employee value proposition, recruitment marketing, recruitment branding, whatever term you want to put, and they say, oh, that's such a cool creative company. You can have bleached hair, tattoos, a bull ring. Say, yes, you can. That is absolutely the environment that we have. And I love that. And when we travel, you meet some of our creatives across the globe. They are some of the coolest people with really unique backgrounds. But I always will also say, of course, a great place. I believe in it. We performance manage. We have expectations. We have OKRs. We have performance reviews. We have performance managed people out of the business before. And I don't say that to say, or to be negative in any way. I say it to give it straight because we are a for-profit business.
Reality is so many companies, in an effort to attract everyone, they don't lead with that type of stuff. And it blows my mind. Like, I think the best example in my mind recently, or in recent history in the last couple of years, was when, Brittany Peach, she recorded her layoff at Cloudflare, right? That was a company. And it was like, I went to that company page, and that company page is so fluffy and nice. And it was like, oh, we just have a peaceful belonging. It was like just so fluffy. But then the CEO on X was just like, hey, look, we're a performance company. We're high performance. Compared it to like a sports team. And I'm like, look, bro, it's cool that you said that on X, but like, that's how it is, man. If you're high performance, you're a sports team, and you're using those analogies, stick that one on the career page. And then when recruiters, because she went through and said, well, during my during the hiring and recruitment process, which was really long, they kept talking about long-term development. They kept talking about investment and like, yeah, we're investing in you long-term. They didn't mention like a short runway and you got to get results in the first 90 days. And to your point, I think like it's actually okay to talk about that stuff, and we got to talk about that stuff. Otherwise, it's like you're creating like a false expectation and narrative, and that's where people come in and they get disappointed and they go, wait a minute, this isn't what I was expecting. It's not what you said.
It has to map.
But you also told me that your culture is like, what's like your company culture about, like, in terms of like telling the truth, right?
Yeah, we have a core value called "Give it to me straight."
Give it to me straight. I love that,
and that's like, it's born from Radical Candor, the book. Challenge professionally, care personally. And give it to me straight is different depending on what coast you're on, even in the US or where I'm from and where you're from. It's different in the UK, different in Australia. So what I'm talking about is, I actually found that people want to perform. They want an environment where they're performing. And I have never once recruited or coached a player in my professional coaching career that did not want to win. Now you can win the right way by, hard work and honesty and all these things and development. But I think that the situation you described with her was very extreme, and it didn't map from the candidate, like from the moment a candidate opens up that job ad, wherever it is, to that applicant flow, to onboarding, to how their first 3 months and the expectations that are set out for them. Everybody is going to have a different set of expectations in the first 90 days. What sucks is when those aren't defined and you have no idea what those actually are. So I'll circle back to an earlier point of like, talent is talent. You change the acquisition, change to management, change to L&D. Talent is talent. And we all need to be privy to the fact that that experience from opening that email or opening that job ad all the way through to your performance reviews should map and track relatively close. The problem is when companies, like when it cuts off after you sign your offer letter. And it's like, here's your onboarding, we're transacting this now. Here's your job, like punch in, punch out, whatever it is. It crushes me to hear about those things, because in my organization, it's easier because we're relatively small. And when we're not hiring, I can start to take on some of these performance management things and get privy to that and start to drive some of those. At other companies, it's much bigger. I think that as ebbs and flows of talent acquisition and macroeconomic conditions are impacting hiring, we have to understand that some of the best people that are going to move the needle on the company are already here. And let's figure out who those high performers are. And when we go out to market and try to hire, let's try to replicate that at or above the standard. And that only really comes if you start getting into the room with those people that are leading those kinds of functions in your company. For me, it's easy because it's like, it's three of us on the people team. And then, of course, we have the recruiting team.
Because I hear that a lot where it's like, okay, larger companies, they kind of get an out. But here's where I think that can kind of fall apart is like larger companies have more resources. And if you've got more resources, then you should be able to do more with those resources. And I think what happens is like the metrics become, like at least what I've seen is like a lot of times the metrics become how many applicants do we have instead of what's the quality of those applicants.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just kind of becomes a numbers game that people are they kind of everyone's kind of passing the buck on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why like maybe at a smaller company you have a little bit more control over that. But ultimately I think with large companies, like when you have the resources, to me, that means you have less of an excuse for like dropping the ball, especially when we're talking about like the ghosting things and the poor candidate experience. But with that, obviously there's a lot of opportunity, like you said. And I love that. Surprise and
Delight. I think one of the best books that a recruiter could read is Be Our Guest. It's Disney's guide to service and customer support and success. Like you could ask the guy in the goofy goofy costume or whatever, hey, I need to find the closest place to get a hot dog. He'll bring over somebody that can answer, even if he himself is behind a mask. And you can ask a person in a suit. You can ask one of the construction workers. They all will go out of their way to surprise and delight a customer.
In our culture nowadays, at least what I've seen, even just around town, it's like, so I think Starbucks is a great example, right? Like the new CEO came in and was like, all right, now you got to write something on the cup. And my wife had that happen recently where they wrote something on a cup. She's like, I was like, they're missing the point. The point isn't to write something on the cup. The point is to make a connection with people.
Right.
Writing on a cup means nothing if you don't make a connection.
Right.
But it's so much like that. And I think it's easy to do that. It can be easy to do that in recruiting, right? Because it's like a lot of times we get overwhelmed and stressed. But I think it's taking that ownership, right? And like going, all right, like this is branding. This is marketing. This all matters.
When in my next presentation, I just added this in. It's the 3 phases of the hiring, and all it is 3 different logos of companies. So on the recruitment marketing, like top of funnel side, it's a Liquid Death logo. Like, what do you think of when you see Liquid Death? Like edgy, cool, like anti marketing, but somehow they've disrupted water. Like you disrupted water, and they lean into the hate comments too. But everybody has something that they think of when they hear about Liquid Death. It's just something. It doesn't have to be positive, negative. And then in the mid funnel, it's Disney. It's just a Disney logo, the Mickey ears. And then the onboarding phase, it's a DoubleTree hotel logo. Like you get a cookie every time you show up. People remember that, and it's just a cookie, but it's something. And that it's something minor that makes them massively unique that you don't forget.
What I'm hearing is you've taken Canada experience like literally, and you're creating experiences because you understand that like anyone who interacts with the brand, I mean, I love what you said about anyone who interacts with the brand, they could refer another, someone else great.
Mhm.
They could potentially be, a customer. The marketing and branding side that I think gets lost in Canada experience, it's like you can actually impact an experience. And who knows, like maybe you have maybe one of the people that comes in second because they've obviously gone through your process and they're a great candidate. Maybe they end up getting a role at a company, and then the company's like, man, we need to augment our design team, and they're like, Design Pickle is the only place to go. I
Yeah.
had an amazing experience with them. Suddenly that's created, and maybe that's not trackable, but I think we got to get away. I think being mindful of data is definitely useful and helpful, and it can tell a story. But I think sometimes there's a lot of stories that are told that the data doesn't pick up. And I see this with like branding and marketing. Like companies come to me, hey, can you partner with us? Like, how many clicks can we get from this campaign? And I'm like, it's all about clicks, because sometimes people will people won't click, but like 2 months later they'll buy from you because they remember the logo, and I can't track that. And I think sometimes it's like that with candidate experience. It's like you can't track all of the positive things that happen. So maybe it's hard for an ROI, but like it matters. Like it matters more than I think we give it.
You probably know this from placements you've made, and this was a very, very massive moment for me in my agency life, was when people I placed became my client. They became the hiring manager, and they remembered the experience that they went through with me and the organization, and they remembered that. It's absolutely true. You can in some ways track ENPS, but those are based on the people that actually do them, and you're typically going to get like the bookends, right? Like treat it like a Yelp review. Like, how many people go out of the way to leave good Google or Yelp reviews or G2 reviews? That's usually the people that are pissed, that think first, that want to air it out publicly. So that's where I agree with you on the whole data side. I'm actually not a data person. I track what I need to track for my team and for my leadership, but quality of hire and business performance are better metrics for me and how my team is performing than how many people got through the funnel at X stage, because there's been times when it's been 2 candidates, like one interview, or a couple interviews, one hired. There's been times when it's been 1,000, and it's hard to like say this is what we're going to see from an applicant flow standpoint. It's like, just be open, like just trust that if I put someone in front of you or we talk about somebody, like they're relevant and they're worth screening. And
this is where, I mean, we didn't get into it today, but I think this is where this is kind of where I think when it comes to AI, technology, automation, data, it's not even like in the talent acquisition space. It's just it's a lot of things in life. It's like data and theory and all of these things. They can be important, but sometimes it's just like practical use case. I love that example of like, sometimes it's just 2 people and one like you interview them and you got the best person. It does happen, but sometimes it's like we can try and create this like perfect process. It just doesn't always work out that way.
It's a win or a loss. And I don't mean to segue, but like you go look at the record book and the archives of my soccer playing career. No one cares if I played well, if I hit the post, if I had a 16 headers that I won. They see a W or an L in the record book. And I'm trying to train us to not be so hung up on all of the data points. There's a lot of valid data here, especially when it comes to sourcing and spending and things like that. But we want to win. And that's when we're tracked. That's why I'm getting so close with performance management and onboarding and
cool.
Things like that. So it's a story that we can really lean into from start to finish as talent people.
I love it. Well, Cailean, you're going to be speaking at ERE Innovation. It's going to be coming up. It's actually probably already happened if you're listening to this episode. And it's been amazing, but it was so good. Any other events on your radar? And, for people who wanted to connect with you, where's the best place for them to connect with you? Where can they find out about Design Pickle? Where do you want people going?
Yeah, my LinkedIn is always open. I'm happy to connect. And I really love this community that you and others have built. around supporting. We're all fighting the same battle. So LinkedIn is the best way. You'll probably have to drop my name in so people can spell it correctly.
Yeah. We'll have your profile in the links as well.
Okay.
So.
Designpickle.com. Pretty easy. If you're in a pickle and you need design, go to Design Pickle. So
hey, there you go.
It. And then I'll be speaking at Lativerse in San Francisco in June, and then we'll see what comes up.
Dude, you better be at RecFest.
I love Nashville. You know what? I'm a book the ticket guy, so I'll commit to it. I'll commit to it right here that I'll be there.
RecFest is a good one. So guys, if you're looking for a job and you just want to get a hold of a recruiter, just go to Nashville and go to RecFest, and there'll be a bunch of recruiters. All the recruiters you can get feedback from, that's where they're going to be. I shouldn't say that.
Get all the feedback you want in one day.
We're just going to have like a protest, like a recruiter protest right next door to it. But Cailean, look, it's been great connecting with you. And just for anyone who's out there, multiple people have mentioned Cailean to me as like, hey, this is someone you need to get on the podcast, someone you need to connect with. And I love the focus here on candidate experience. I think if you're a recruiter and you're looking to elevate your candidate experience, you need to re-listen to this episode. But I think it's also helpful for candidates to understand as well, just like there are companies out there that do actually care. You probably have to find them, and it probably takes a little bit longer to find them. But awesome episode. Appreciate your time, and looking forward to meeting in real life in Vegas. And for anyone who's made it this far in the podcast, well done. You really are my hero. And if you want more information on me, go to www.therealistrecruiter.com. And a couple other announcements too. I'm running every single month now. I'm running a 4-week cohort for job seekers. So if you look for a job, I got a nice cohort for you guys. And I'm also doing like the LinkedIn cohort as well every single month. So if you're looking at either of those, you can find information on that on my LinkedIn. They're on my profile. And I love you guys. Appreciate all of you. Cailean, thank you again. And we'll talk soon, no doubt.
Thank you.